answer. But the other thing, just quickly on this, is the following. There are very tough decisions that the government is going to have to make over tuition fees in this country. With the rise of people going to university, we do find ourselves in a situation that somebody simply has to pay. And government is going to have to, and opposition is going to have to come up with more realistic ways to deal with that. We have been living in recent years through a period of complete unreality under a government and an opposition that desire policies, say they want certain policies, but don't sign the checks for them. And that cannot continue. At some point, as we all know with our bank managers, reality comes hitting.
OK, let's go on to Hazel, representing Labour Party. What's going on with Labour?
Important, and I think that women do bring something different to politics, and therefore it's important that we encourage, particularly young women, to come forward as well.
OK, Douglas, let's come to you next. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there is still a shamingly small number of women in our parliament. I think the Iraqi parliament has 25% of its MPs are women, and we have less than that in our parliament. I think that's pretty shaming. That said, I mean, look, like most people, I mean, you know, you want Parliament to represent the people and represent the country generally more. But when you push these things, I mean, the sort of positive discrimination things, they can go badly wrong when people are promoted or are given seats simply because of their gender or indeed their colour or their background or anything else. You know, it doesn't always come to any good. I mean, I was much amused, by the way, when David Cameron was talking about the fact that Chloe Smith represented a whole new brand of politics. I mean, he might like to wish that we'd all forget about Margaret Thatcher. But we haven't, and it is extraordinary. I mean, the party that provided us with the first female Prime Minister, love her or loathe her, it seems to keep on presenting women as if it's an entirely new idea. No one else ever thought about it. And look, it is though, a serious problem when people are promoted just because of something like their gender. And I think that Hazel will probably agree that when it has happened in her party, and I don't want to name any names, that it has happened on occasions, possibly, it doesn't end up with great results.
OK, thank you. Any comments on this question?
I'm not talking about Hazel, by the way. I thought you were.
I didn't think you were, actually. There was somebody else, a deputy leader of some sort. I can't think which person.
I was thinking of a Home Secretary.
Oh, right. Well, different story altogether. Any comments at all? If you'd like to raise your hand and come to the front, if you do have any.
Thank you. I think it's really difficult.
And have done over the time.
I'm interested in what Hazel thinks about this. There is an argument that Westminster itself is, as it were, a sort of male-ridden environment, which not because just the majority of MPs are male, but that in its nature at the moment it still feels like women sort of have to push through it to get access. I don't know if that's still felt by your generation.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there 12 years now, and you'd think that I would feel comfortable, at home, part of the place, and I don't. And I think that's partly because of the nature of the building, the architecture, the wood panels. We've still got the men in tights, the messengers.
There's a halfway house.
Yeah, halfway house, men in tights. But the whole place is actually redolent of an age that we really ought to have put behind us. When I first went to Parliament, I think one of the speeches I made, I said that I thought the house was lovely, but it should be a museum, and that perhaps we ought to have a purpose-built, modern place where you could have some modern politics. And the Speaker, who was Betty Boothroyd at the time, was so outraged. She didn't call me for about 4 months to speak again because she was obviously so proud of the House of Commons. But I still hold that view. I mean, you'd have no public support for spending money to build a new building. But I do think the environment in which you conduct your politics does really have an influence on the way that you debate, the issues that you raise, the kind of thing that goes on. And I think that our environment is redolent of a bygone age, and I think that it is masculine and it's class-ridden. You look at the House of Commons now, and you look at MPs as well. It's not just women. There's hardly anybody now from a working-class background who's come up through politics to the highest level. I think, myself, Alan Johnson, Jackie Smith to some extent, we are basically the few people who lived in our constituencies and come up through a very different route, and I think politics is the poorer for it.
Well, OK, let's come back to the question. I know we can't quite ask you because you may not be, obviously, probably not a member of Parliament yourself, but what are your views on what the panel has said, especially perhaps Hazel, obviously?
I think there needs to be a kind of change in the general attitude towards women in society overall. I mean, I think...
equipped and they're properly supported.
OK.
But of course, the thing is, it's not enough to do the job, is it? That's the problem. McChrystal's report says they need 45,000 troops. America is going to have to carry the whole of the burden on that. Sarkozy said just yesterday he has no intention of sending any more French troops. This is a NATO expedition, and our partners in NATO are simply not stepping up on this, and a far more attention should be put on that. But just quickly back to the main question, I'm glad it's come up because the gentleman at the back raised it as well. It strikes me that there are a number of failings about our actions in Afghanistan, and the first and the easiest to remedy is a political failing, a terrible failure of political leadership, which has failed very badly in recent years on the part of all parties to explain why our troops are there in the first place. Because of the two tasks we had and have in Afghanistan, the first, to ensure that it can never again be a base from which al-Qaeda can openly run training camps to attack people in America, here, across the Middle East. That phase was pretty much sorted out in the first months of the operation and could continue to be sorted out by retreating to bases and having unmanned, unmanned drone attacks from the air and so on. But the second part of our mission there is a very long way away from completion. Indeed, people have talked about it as a 30-year conflict. I think that could easily be the case. And the situation that we need to do is this. Afghanistan and Afghani society has to be protected, has to be bolstered up to ensure that never again can it fall under the barbaric, medievalist is to flatter it, form of tyranny that the Taliban imposed on them. For that to happen, Afghan civil society, not least Afghanistan's women, have to be bolstered from the situation they're currently in. We have had elections. Our troops were killed protecting people to vote in those elections. I know that people always like to have a quick fix on these things. The simple answer is that there is no quick fix. Or to put it another way, there is a quick fix for us, but it would be a disaster for the people who have Afghanistan. I wish people would remember that.
So the public perception is largely that this war is continuing and will perhaps never stop, or at least the figures, the suggestion is 30 years. We could be there for at least...
One, I think a lot of Canadians would find that quite offensive that you didn't say they should a lot of the burden because they've suffered some of the most casualties. And secondly, the real thing that people are angry about is how under-equipped a lot of our soldiers are. There have been so many lives wasted because they weren't equipped. And I'm sorry, but as a member of Cabinet at the time,